So we've been talking a lot today about being asleep. Gurdjieff actually discusses 4 states of consciousness, and sleep is one of them. So I wondered if we could discuss them.
Right. The 4 states of consciousness will probably sound very alien to people, modern people, because modern people don't really approach this subject at all in modern times. Not even in my experience in religion. It's rarely approached in religion. Perhaps in small ways in Buddhism and maybe 1 or 2 other religions, it's approached in a small way because the Buddhists have names for certain higher states of consciousness, which is interesting. So Gurdjieff tells us there are 4 main states of consciousness for all human beings. The first is the state we sleep in at night in our beds when we are completely passive, and that's a recharging, regenerative state we are in for the next day. Then, as we are now talking to each other in this waking state of consciousness, that's the second state of consciousness possible for man. And these are the 2 states that all of humanity exists in. They don't really go past these states very often, but Gurdjieff says there's a 3rd state and a 4th state that are possible for human beings, as you know. So the 3rd state of consciousness, Gurdjieff explains that many yogic techniques can give us glimpses of this 3rd state of consciousness, but not make it permanent. So we have many people following yogic techniques in the belief that they will make this 3rd and 4th state permanent. But Gurdjieff says no, this is not possible. You will get glimpses of samadhi, you will get glimpses of nirvana, but you will not be able to make them permanent through the means of yogic paths or fikir. So he's saying that this development of the 4 states of consciousness, or the 2 higher in particular, are a science, a very ancient science of the earth. And this is the pivotal thing, that it's not just some fairy tale, it's not some modus operandi dreamt up by people on the sidelines of some religious cult or something. He is saying that this is the core teaching of the very ancient civilizations on our earth, and was very real, very authentic, and had real veracity. So, the 3rd state of consciousness possible for human beings, he outlines. He calls it self-remembering. And the Buddhists call it the witnessing consciousness. And really, this term by the Buddhists is very good, because in self-remembering, we begin to witness life as it were for the first time. It's a startling state to experience, because we experience people and situations and our environment in a totally different way that we've never experienced before. And it's quite a shock, actually, to the system. And then the 4th state of consciousness is a much higher state of consciousness than this 3rd state of self-remembering. And Gurdjieff calls it objective consciousness, and the Buddhists call it nirvana. And sometimes it's referred to as samadhi by certain schools of thought as well. So this samadhi, this nirvana, is the aim of all esoteric teaching. It's the amalgamation of the 2 higher centers with the 5 lower centers. But as you know from Gurdjieff, he says that the 5 lower centers don't function properly in modern times and modern man because of various different reasons. His environment, his upbringing, and various other factors. And so before we can amalgamate the higher centers with the lower centers in the human being, we have to work on these 5 lower centers, and we have to use esoteric knowledge to do this.
Gurdjieff says, this is a quote of his, that it is better to be eaten, burnt by the sun, than raw by the moon. So I wondered if you could just discuss about the solar and lunar currents in society.
Okay, so solar and lunar currents in society are not dealt with in ordinary academia or ordinary teachings of religion or various different organizations. But if we could bring it into a sort of a simple format and think of it like this, all positive and higher aspiring currents in society will be termed solar. So all conservation on the earth, all organizations that wish to save energy, human beings, animals, all kinds of species of plants, this would be seen as solar. Anything that is downwardly moving, various different dangerous cults, maybe dangerous religions, maybe dangerous organizations who have very violent tendencies or negative tendencies towards other human beings or the planet itself, they would be seen as a lunar current in society, so a negative current. So any solar current will be an upward octave, moving upwards towards consciousness, integrity, vision, whereas the lunar current is always categorized as a downward moving octave, which is negative, which is violent, which is aggressive, which is prejudicial and racist. That's the simplest form of explaining the lunar and solar currents in society.
Maybe that's why the sun is always there for us. Okay, it's not there at night, but the moon, when it is there at night, goes through phases, doesn't it? Perhaps
Yes.
it gives us the chance to...
Yeah, we shouldn't
Get
look
away
at it
from
too literally, that the moon is
Yeah.
evil, because we shouldn't look at it like that. The moon has a function to play in the scale of things in our solar system. The sun has a much bigger role to play, obviously, and the planets have also got a role. So it's placing things in perspective. It's not really black and white. We have to study esotericism to see that everything has a role to play, and man has a role to play. We have a role to play, and individually we have a role to play in our life. So everything has perspective. We have to look at things in terms of perspective and scale. Everything is in terms of scale. But modern academia has lost the idea of scale. That is a major problem with modern academia. But in esotericism, scale is very important. From man, microcosm, to macrocosm, and everything in between, there is a scale of energies and functions that we have to deal with and understand. And then we understand our own functioning, our own purpose, much better.
And another thing we have to deal with is sacrifice, which Gurdjieff discusses quite a bit in the work, that we have to make sacrifice in the work.
Yeah, difficult as it may seem, and it is a difficult idiom to approach. When we reach a certain level in our work, our spiritual work, our work in esotericism, understanding the nature of man and the universe, then sacrifice will be demanded of us, not by somebody verbally coming up to us and say, well, you have to sacrifice this in order to gain that, although that can happen, but it's more to do with what we can recognize in our life that we need to sacrifice in order to gain something which is very valuable in terms of the inner life, integrity, and profound development of ourselves. We may have to sacrifice certain things over here in order to actually move into that sphere, into that space.
There's no rules as to what them sacrifices are. It's going to be different for each individual.
Different for each individual, and it will become clear to you, sometimes very painfully clear, what you have to sacrifice in order to move forward in a positive way, not in a negative way, in a positive way. You may have to sacrifice certain negative habits in your life. You may have to sacrifice certain negative people that undermine you in a certain way, but you may not be too clear on this, that is happening in your life. You may have to sacrifice those people, maybe push them out of your life if they're holding you back. And this is a common one. If we have certain people around us that we may even care about strangely, but they may undermine us in a very strange way. And when our cognitive level increases, we can see if this is happening or not. And if it is happening, we have to take action, and we sometimes have to sacrifice people.
And as we're doing this work on ourselves, it's our knowledge in our being that's developing, isn't it? So could you discuss the principle of knowledge and being?
The principle of knowledge and being, very important one, because in esotericism it's explained that it's not just a person's knowledge, but also their being that's very, very important. And they develop in tandem. So a person's knowledge will develop to quite a level, but if their being doesn't develop in tandem at the same rate as their knowledge, all of their development, including their knowledge, will stop. And it's the same with regard to their being. If their being develops too high and their knowledge lags behind, then again, the development of that human being will reach a glass ceiling and it will stop. So we have what Gurdjieff calls in life, we have the stupid saint. So that is somebody who's working on the way of the monk, but doesn't have enough knowledge to go further. And this is an important one. And then he talks about the weak yogi, a man or a woman who has a lot of knowledge, but they're falling behind in the development of being. So this is a weak yogi. And so these things, although they sound very strange when we talk about them, because most people are not used to these terms or this terminology, actually you will find many people around you in society who actually this is happening to them.
So it's the having to work on all different parts of yourself. This is why esoteric development is really just for those that really are dedicated to changing themselves so that they can then work with the world.
Yeah, that change can happen incrementally as we discover more and more about esotericism. We can get new impetus, we can get new interest through the process of exploring esotericism. This is what is really important. If we explore esotericism with a sound heart, with a deep and penetrating vision, with sincerity and humility, and I have to stress that we do need to be sincere and humble to approach esotericism, because in the modern day we are taught to do everything via the ego. You cannot approach esotericism through the ego. It has to be via humility, sincerity, and from the heart. If we don't approach esotericism from the heart, we will fail, because we will intellectualize that which is very profound, very deep, and full of light. So to take that light onto ourselves, we have to understand what humility means. Actually, humility means not what we think it is at all in modern day times. Humility means leaving a space for something very profound and very special inside ourselves. So there's the analogy of the cup, the Zen master pouring into the cup, and the cup keeps overflowing and overflowing, and the student is going, "Master, please stop pouring it because it's overflowing." And the master's going, "This is just like you. You cannot take in what I'm telling you because you are already full of societal aims, societal thoughts, societal theories." So this Zen teaching is it really explains what Gurdjieff is talking about. Modern day people are full to the brim of all sorts of ideas and all sorts of aims and all sorts of ego, and it's this that prevents us. We don't have the space inside, the humility, the sincerity, to be open to these wonders, this knowledge of the ancient world, which is now brought into modern times by Gurdjieff and Ouspensky in a partial way, because he did say it was fragments of an unknown teaching. It's not a complete teaching, but we do know that there are schools on the earth that have this teaching in full. That is what is most pertinent.
Well, today's talk's been fantastic, and a lot in there for people to take in and assimilate. So I'd like to thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
And until next time, we shall speak again soon. Thank you for watching. Joe runs a course called The Core Teaching. It is a foundation course in esoteric teachings and Gurdjieff.